Good afternoon. My name is Mike Ehrenstein, and I'm joined by my good friend and Litigation Counsel of America fellow, Richard Knoth. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about and explore a phenomenon that I call the post-trial tailspin. And, you know, in the work that I do, I've had the opportunity to be involved doing some work with justice-involved veterans. And they come back from war-torn countries and they have some problems readjusting to civilian life sometimes. And sometimes we end up getting involved with them. And one of the things that happens is I get to hear their stories about how coming back to civilian life after being in combat is just a jarring experience for them. And the reason for that is that the urgency and importance and clarity that accompanies their mission is no longer there. And so the humdrum day-to-day life of the regular civilian just seems unfulfilling and boring. I think as trial lawyers, a lot of us feel something in a minor way that's akin to that when we come off of a trial. And that's what I call, that's what I'm referring to when I discuss when we're going to talk about this tailspin. After a trial, we are, if we've done it right, I think, we are exhausted. I mean, beyond exhausted. The adrenaline withdrawal is tough to adjust to, and it can lead to feelings that are, I wouldn't call them clinical depression, but a little bit akin to depression. So since we're all trial lawyers, and since we go to trial, hopefully a lot, this is something that I know I've had to deal with. And I think it's something that a lot of us have to deal with. And that's why I think we could maybe learn a thing or two about it from a true trial veteran like Dick Knoth. Now, one of the reasons that I've asked Dick to join us today to talk about this is he's the real deal. So Dick has tried, I think you'll correct me if I'm wrong, over 100 cases to verdict or judgment. And these are not one-day trials. The last trial that Dick finished, I think a few weeks ago, was I think a 6-week trial. Did you say?
Correct.
A 6-week grueling slog through commercial litigation hell. And so coming off of something like that, I'm sure, I know I've been through a 5-week trial and it just about killed me. And so I'd like to hear from Dick and ask him to share with us whether he's experienced this post-trial tailspin and maybe tell us about a recent case, maybe the most recent case that you just finished, and tell us how he's dealt with it.
Thank you, Mike. And it's always good to hear your voice and speak with you. During your tenureship as president, and then before then, we've become good friends and share a lot of interests and likes, one of which is the law and trial practice. And thank you for your kind remarks. I have had the honor to try a lot of cases of all different types and sorts. And like most of us, when we first started trying cases to juries as first years, those were very obviously simple cases, very straightforward. But over the last couple of decades, fortunately, the complexity has grown, but so has the length and detail of the case grown. And I should start by saying I come from a family of veterans that a couple brothers and my father served during wartime, and he certainly would roll over in his grave to think that anything I do as a trial lawyer comes anything close to being a vet. What they went through, and I know that certainly was not your intention. No. But there is what you describe as the tailspin that we come out of. And at first, in the early days, I just thought I had the flu or something. It was very flu-like, and emotions were down, you're tired. But as things grew and we tried more and more cases of more difficult topics, and more important cases, that flu became clearly a tailspin that has both emotional and physical origins. In the case that you mentioned that we tried, the 6-week trial, it's not my longest trial. It was one of the most important trials I had of recent tenure. In a nutshell, it had to do with the public bidding of very large healthcare contracts for large governmental entities. And we were pitted against a competitor who was able to get their hands on our internal financials through the governmental entities improperly. And we kept losing many, many bids. And we thought there was a problem. We learned what the problem was, and then went through a 4-year pre-trial battle to get our hands on the evidence. And your term slog, this was a slog by definition. Very good attorneys on the other side, but fought tooth and nail on every front, including on the pretrial basis, to keep us away from some very significant documents and the data behind those documents, to see how it had been shared and who it had been shared with. I won't bore you with details, but the bottom line is, literally a couple of months before trial, the judge finally gave us access to some critical metadata that we then used forensic scientists to track everything. And lo and behold, we had evidence of handoff, well, what we called the swipe, for some information that was taken from the government entities, a handoff, and then an electronic cherry pick that was very well orchestrated, not with the attorneys that we opposed in the case, but with other attorneys who are now under investigation because they were involved in the swipe and the cherry pick and the handoff. So it was solid days and nights, and I'd love to take full credit for our solid victory. I can't, because it's a full team, and as you know from our prior discussions, I'm blessed to have developed a couple of really good trial teams. And it's funny, you think things affect you the most, but even the youngest attorneys on the team, and I had some first and second years on this most recent team, and they had no idea. I told them, you're going to go into the tailspin. They're like, oh, no, I've gone through a lot in life. And they came
young, I'm tough.
Right. You old guys, you might
Right.
get caught in that tailspin, but they wouldn't. And they did. And it affects us all a little differently, but it's clearly something that's there. And until you go through it, people don't understand it.
Right. So just, this was a 4-year slog to trial, then a 6-week slog through trial. And yes. I can't imagine that this was not a document intensive case, right? Where there,
right. Okay. So in discovery, there were in excess of 1 million documents. I mean, millions and millions of bits of data that went through, because we had to track the bids and all the data that went into the bids, which for, we're talking healthcare contracts in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And everybody knows those are complex all on their own.
Right.
But in trial itself, we weaned that down. I think there were 1,400 exhibits. There were probably 90 to 95 key exhibits that were used repeatedly.
And combative witnesses, I'm sure.
Yes. In fact, some of the most combative. Now, I've had cases all over the country. And most of my cases were tried out of town. And candidly, I think my family appreciates that when I try a case, it's usually out of town. It's easier. And they don't have to go through the daily what happened today thing.
Right.
And I've had cases where my life had actually been threatened before. My family had been in a federal trial in Newark, New Jersey. That's was interesting. But in this case, the former, at the time of the trial, she was the former CEO. She was the CEO of the opponent at the time. And when her deposition was taken, she was the CEO. At trial, she was, quote, the retired CEO. She was on the stand early in our case for 4 days as on cross. And it was pretty clear we had her with evidence that she did not realize we had her with.
Mhm.
When she was deposed, the court had yet to order the turnover of a lot of critical documentation. And they thought they'd be able to keep that under wraps. And once we got it out, we made the strategic decision not to redepose any witnesses once some of the critical evidence came out, because we didn't want to give them any kind of idea what we were going to do with it. So when she was on day 2 of cross in an afternoon, she got up and made a very unfriendly remark in front of the jury.
Nice.
And was reprimanded by the judge. And then the last day of trial, she literally became physically abusive.
She
Or
tried-
attempted, literally tried to take a swing.
Wow.
And it was significant enough that the younger associates who I referenced earlier said they would not start my car in the parking lot.
Wow.
So it was pretty significant. And I should add, as a result of the trial, and there was a lot of publicity relating to it, there's both a civil or a state and a federal criminal investigation ongoing.
So not to minimize this. I mean, it's easy for me in my comfortable office in Miami, far away from where you are, to kind of make light of the fact that this witness, you had an effective cross when the witness gets off the stand and takes a swing at you,
Right.
in front of the jury. But it's not. It's definitely something that would compound the normal trial stress that everybody feels, right?
It did. In some ways, by that time, it wasn't laughable, but it was. I didn't take it too serious. It was. You almost felt sorry for her.
Right.
The way it came off, and we had done a lot of jury testing pre-trial, and realized that a non-cynical all-female jury would be the best for us, and that's what we ended up with.
Wow.
But we also did some testing to see how best to approach harsh examination of a female executive, because that all has to play into it.
Sure.
And my concern throughout that episode of the case was to make sure you weren't going overboard, especially an older male experienced trial attorney.
Right.
Could appear as coming off the top. But I had a couple of the associates just focused on that issue to make sure that wasn't a problem. And when this all kind of unraveled after her exam, one of my concerns and primary concerns was, how is the jury really going to react to this?
Right.
And how will all those women in the box respond? Well, they responded, in our view, the right way, obviously.
So the end result of the slog on top of the slog was a victory.
A victory. Now, we're only part of the way there. Subsequent to that case, we've filed couple actions now against the partner, their co-partners in a joint venture. And that trial's on appeal. Their appeal was dismissed. Prior to trial, the racketeering counts were dismissed. We have those on appeal. We were told that we were going to have a decision this past Friday, and it wasn't handed down. So literally, every day we're waiting to see what's in the mail.
So there's the first battle has been won.
Yes.
And the first battle in the larger war has been won. And so now comes, and it was a victory. This is great.
Mhm.
After a trial and you've won, are you feeling just complete elation, or what to describe for us the let off?
That's a great question, because we were pretty comfortable with what we put in evidence, and the judge kept a few things out, but principally let everything in. So we were pretty confident in our case, but the other side was very confident in their case as well.
Right.
We've all had that situation where we've been very confident,
Yeah.
and it doesn't come out well. But the verdict came back, and I tell you what, we were excited. We were pleased with the effort of the jurors. Put a lot into this.
Mm-hmm.
Pleased with the court's efforts. So we said our thank yous, and then walked outside the courtroom and collapsed. Literally, one person almost did, because it was we were still wearing masks during the trial, which raises a whole different issue. And we were out of town, and I said, look, anybody that wants to head back to Cleveland, they can, but I can't physically make it. Let's go out for just a quiet dinner tonight, enjoy ourselves. And we did that, and I'm glad we did, because it kind of brought everybody together. And we talked a little bit about this issue and how it's going to take some time to unwind. And this was one of the toughest cases to come out of the fog, if you will.
So what did you feel when you get the let off, when you're coming off of it? I mean, you described flu-like symptoms. For me, the way it hits me usually is I feel exhausted, beyond exhausted. I need 2 or 3 days to sleep, and then as I come back to normal life, it takes me a while to get back to normal, and I don't feel that energy that I normally have, or that I had when I was in the courtroom.
Right. It takes it out of you both. I think what you've described there is almost the psychological side. It takes it out on the physical side as well. We had, in those last couple of weeks, there were 5 trial days, and this judge had us coming in at 8 to argue motions and argue issues, and then would release us at 6 p.m. And he started this briefing schedule on all these issues. So there were at least 3 nights each of the last 2 weeks where no one on the team slept, which is, for me, terrible. Right. I get by on a lot less sleep than I'm told than most, which is great, but I still need it. And so your cycles were totally out of jam. Mm-hmm. And you can't get to sleep. I'm not a medicines guy, nope. So I don't like to take sleeping enhancements or anything like that. Even exercising, and I know your exercise routine is very important to you. I don't have haven't had quite the routine you do, but I had some routine. Even getting back to that routine, it's hard. It was difficult. I mean, you kind of almost lose your focus. And when you think of it, though, you are so focused in trial, and in this case, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., you're not checking news. You're not seeing what's going on ESPN or who got traded today. That's right. All that goes by. Mm-hmm. And you are so focused on the evidence of what's going on in that courtroom that you don't think of anything.
So You have the physical exhaustion of just being up, standing, talking. You have that, and not sleeping. You have the mental exhaustion of, I mean, think of all the things that you have to know when you're trying the case, and the things that you have to pay attention to. You got to pay attention to the witness. You got to pay attention to the judge. You got to pay attention to the jury. You got to know the documents and the evidence inside and out. You got to know the what's going on with your team. You've got to know the law inside and out on all of the issues that are in front of you. And you're mentally handling all of this, juggling all of this seamlessly for 6 weeks on end. When that stops and all you can let all the balls hit the ground, poof, mentally that's an adjustment. It's a huge adjustment, right?
Yes, it really is. But there's some things you can do to lighten that load a little bit.
Tell me.
One is make sure you have a fantastic team working trials like I do, in large part. And you raised that issue a little bit. It's important. These issues are not only important to us personally that play lead roles, and I've been a lead counsel for 20, 25 years now. But you got to make sure your team's taken care of on all fronts. So my ritual during trial is here's our meal times, here's our meal schedule, and here you can pick what you want to eat from this limited menu, but this is what we're doing.
Right.
And I want, to the extent we can, I want everybody trying to get some sleep, staying focused. Everybody's moving in the same direction. It's a little bit like a family. It's not a 6-week vacation, but there's going to be a few skirmishes here and there and disagreements as the process goes, but you have to keep focused on the team. And that's critical, especially with the younger people. The younger attorneys have a very different mindset than the senior associates, junior partners have.
Tell me
how they approach work.
How's
I actually went to a couple of lectures on this, especially during the height of the COVID days. Younger attorneys, and I think just younger individuals, but especially among attorneys, they're willing to work hard and do the work, but they want to be heard and they want their work to be utilized. I mean, that's human nature.
Sure.
But that's harder to do in our practice. So you've got to give them space, airtime, and appreciation.
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but when I was raised as a young trial attorney, those weren't even on our radar screen.
No.
You did the work and just hope you guys won the case.
Right.
And you got paid.
Absolutely.
So it's a little different mindset. I'm not complaining, but you got to be cognizant of it.
So that's another one of the balls you got to have up in the air that you're juggling, right?
Exactly.
So we have physical exhaustion, we have mental exhaustion, and then, I mean, emotionally, I know I feel it emotionally for me. I mean, everybody's different, but I think we're emotionally exhausted because we care.
Yes.
I mean, you care. If you don't care enough to look, you have to care. You're not doing this to get an extra couple of bucks because you stayed up for 3 nights in a row.
Right.
There's no amount of money on earth that's, really worth it to be going through that. You're doing it because you care about the client. You care deeply about the issue. You care. And so again, that's another layer of exhaustion to add on top of the mental and the physical. You're just emotionally, oh my God, it's finally over. I can breathe,
Right.
So in addition to taking care of your team and kind of telling everybody get some sleep, managing your diet, through the trial and even pre-trial. Is there anything else that you do during the trial process to kind of take the edge off of the impending end?
A little bit. You try, like you, but not to your extent. I try to have some routines pre-trial, like life routines.
Sure.
And those set patterns, and those are the patterns you often miss. But what I try to do is at least keep a few patterns. I'm not going to be able to get up and work out at the hotel every morning, but I might get a run in or even a nice walk real early in the morning. Yeah. And on a Friday at the end of trial, and when we were in trial, we're gone 6 weeks, right? Shuffling back and forth. So on Fridays, you have kind of a workout routine during trial where you at least go through the motions. Even if you're not building up that great sweat, you're doing something. Right. There's certain, I'm a big radio guy. In college, I was one of the radio announcers for the hockey team. Didn't know how to play hockey, but I was one of the announcers, which was kind of fun. So I've always kind of grown up with a radio, and I've kind of integrated that into my routine, that at X o'clock, there's going to be NPR on and BBC on in the evening, just to kind of try to take you away a little bit. And
yep,
some of that routine that you have and you enjoy. One thing I try to do, especially after in the last 5 or 6 years, I plan a trip with my wife, usually
for after the trial.
Right after the trial, if you can. Now this year we had to postpone it because there were so many post-trial issues that there was a lot of publicity. We had the investigations, we had government subpoenas to deal with. So the trip got delayed a couple of weeks. But even just a long weekend, 4 or 5 day, you're not doing anything. You might read part of a book.
Right. Okay.
I try to, when I'm out of town, I try to find a breakfast place that's open either all night or early in the morning that I can walk to, just to get the coffee and walk back and forth. Just those little snippets of regular life kind of help bring you back and draw you back. But I think before trial, if you can get some routines in place. During trial, in dealing with the client, oftentimes 1 or 2 in-house counsel are there. In addition to the client rep, I do not use in-house counsel as the client rep for a lot of different reasons. So usually a lower level attorney, or oftentimes it's a paralegal, is responsible for making sure there's a comfort level for the client rep. Mm-hmm. Then with the in-house counsel, they're usually reporting back at fixed times to the CEO and the like. So I find out what their report schedule is, work around that, and then tell them, look, maybe on a Tuesday night, I can take you out. They oftentimes go home, so they're not there for the weekends or Friday nights. So you kind of advise them up front. Here's our schedule. Mm-hmm. And to a client, they're never offended that you tell them, look, I can't be out having dinner every night and this type of thing.
Of course. I mean, you're not going to be able to be in the fight if you're,
we're there to win.
Right.
And
right. You're there to win.
That's not the time for entertainment.
Right. So the steak and wine comes later. One of the nice things that you told me about that is after the trial, you have a tradition of inviting your team over and cooking a meal for them.
Right.
That is a great tradition and part of a nice way to reintroduce yourselves to normal life after the trial.
Right. We do that, and we've done that now for several years in many trials, because it's the trial teams. I've got 2 active trial teams at any given time. Some overlap, But the personalities change, so not all of them have seen it. But my wife Patty and I really enjoy cooking, and cook pretty well. We do a pretty good job together. So we will bring in everybody, and their significant others or friends, and the client, and sometimes several client reps, and just really enjoy. It's kind of fun to serve them, and they
Yeah,
see a whole different way, I think, as a result of that. And it's almost like a capstone
yes.
to do that. So it's a tradition we started several years ago, and will continue as long as the success continues, which I think is going to happen for a while.
I love that tradition. And I love the way that it helps kind of demarcate the end of the trial and the beginning of going back. I want to say thank you, because not everybody's willing to talk about this. It's an uncomfortable topic for a lot of lawyers. And for somebody who is as seasoned and experienced as you are, to be sharing your insight with us is really valuable, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that. And I should add, Mike, your tenure as president is coming to a close, I think, shortly. You've done a great job leading this group. It's an important group, and I appreciate spending this time with you today.
Thanks, Dick. Appreciate it.